You're Mr. Music Games. I'm sure you've already imagined what is like res with 3D audio on the PS5.
Gucci, my guy.
Tetris Effect. The blocks are going to fall all around you.
Give me that. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Paul Tamayo, video producer here at Kotaku, and today I'm joined by Stephen Totillo, editor-in-chief here at Kotaku. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So, kind of wanted to have this little special edition of Viewpoints to have a state of console gaming. So we're going to go through each console, and I figured we'd start off with the PlayStation 4, since PlayStation is celebrating their 25th anniversary this week, actually, which is pretty neat to think about. Let's
just say we randomly selected it. We don't love any one console more than any other. Equal love.
Yeah, so the PlayStation 4, which officially launched on November 15th, 2013, so it's been around for a minute.
Yes.
This year seemed, like you said in your write-up, actually, which is live on the site now, so go check that out, for the state of PlayStation 4. Shameless plug. This year's definitely seemed like a cool down year, where it seemed like they were kind of like easing on the gas, maybe braking, getting ready for the. I'm playing a lot of Grid and Gran Turismo.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, you gotta
stop thinking about all those sharp turns.
I was playing earlier, but yeah. So this year we had games like Days Gone, which I was sort of one of the people here on staff that played it and didn't love it as much, but I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
We also had Death Stranding, which is technically not an exclusive, at least for forever. It'll be coming to PC eventually. And we had other games, like I mentioned, Gran Turismo Sport got some updates and made it more of like a full-fledged game, in my opinion. MLB The Show, and then we had, of course, Media Molecule's Dreams Early Access for that.
Right. People are people are making a ton of games themselves on that platform, basically.
Right, yeah. Game. So what do you think of 2019 as a whole for like PS4's library, at least?
Well, you said Days Gone was fine.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the thing, right, is that PlayStation 4's year was fine. But the year before was the year of God of War and Marvel's Spider-Man. You bookend a year with games of that caliber and these big Game of the Year contenders. And it's just hard to follow up. And the thing I pointed out when I was in my write-up and when I was looking back at the year that the PS4 had was that it looks like, if you kind of don't know your history or you don't know what's coming, it looks like, it's just Sony easing off on the PS4 because they announced the PS5 this year. They made it official. Mm-hmm. And it's coming out holidays, so a year from now, if we're doing this a year from now, we'll be talking PS5. We'll be playing PS5 games, which would be pretty cool. And you would think, they're just winding down PS4. But no, it's just this cycle kind of led to a bit of a downturn. Again, not terrible when it comes to PS4 because they got a ton of games no matter what. And if it's an off year to get an original new project from a team led by Hideo Kojima, that's not bad.
Sure. Yeah, I love Death Stranding. I had a really good time with it.
I heard you kind of cooled off on the ending, Paul. Tell people the truth.
I loved 85% of that game.
There you go.
The last third I didn't love so much. But still, we got a decent amount of games, especially like a nice chunky catalog for PS4 owners.
The third-party stuff too. You just because it's also on Xbox or just on PC doesn't mean it isn't great for a PS4 owner. So
sure.
Sekiro, Apex Legends, Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Control. Did people like Borderlands 3? I didn't play Borderlands 3. I don't know if that one cares.
I like my 10 hours before my save got deleted.
Sad moment. Sorry, a moment of silence. Destiny 2's expansion. They had Final Fantasy 14 Shadowbringers expansion, which is one thing that if you had other consoles you didn't get.
That's right.
Xbox does not have Final Fantasy 14 yet. Phil Spencer over at Xbox teasing that it's coming. But it's like, again, an off year for PS4.
Right.
Still a pretty damn good year.
Solid year, for sure. Yeah, and they're boasting about how many units they've been selling and stuff. At this point, they're just kind of like, bragging.
Well, that's what they do, right? And I'm sure I'm sure at some point this year they said there's never been a better time to be a PlayStation gamer, and they'll say that next year too, and the year after that.
Absolutely. But then on top of that, they had some really nice updates and support for some of their services. So finally, users got a chance to change their PSN names.
Yes.
So some of y'all out there who made it in high school or whatever, you're okay now, hopefully. Yep. Remote play for iOS devices and non-Sony
and Android
devices.
And they announced that right as Stadia was coming out.
Right.
And I think that Sony in particular showed signs of being worried that Google Stadia is coming. The big streamers are, oh no, Google with all their money is going to knock everybody out. So they announced, right before Stadia launch, they said, oh, by the way, remote play, which is that thing where your PS4 could be home, but over the internet you can still access games, so you can then wind up playing them on a PC or I'll load up my home PS4, which is in Brooklyn, on my work laptop, in Manhattan, and I'm able to access it. I don't really play games that much through it, but you can do that, and you've been able to do that for years. And they said, oh, by the way, you can do it on Android tablets, which, by the way, is how you can play Stadia. Now, Stadia is not pulling from a home console; it's pulling from the cloud. But it seemed like their attempt to do that, and they also dropped the price on PlayStation Now, which I don't think is as good as Xbox Game Pass, because you don't get new games day and date, but you can get Bloodborne, all kinds of other good PS4 games. You can get
God of War.
Oh yeah, God of War's on there.
Yeah.
You can get top PS3 games, top PS2 games, all for now it's $10 a month. So like a few years ago it was still that like the rental thing, and you pay for like a few hours of the game, and it was terrible.
Weird.
Then they dropped I think $20 a month subscriptions. Still pricey.
Sure.
But this year they go to $10 a month, and it's a good deal.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no way to not, at least in my opinion, feel that like that was definitely impacted by the success that Game Pass is having right now, which
that too, yes.
in my opinion is probably the best deal you can get right now in terms of just a monthly subscription. But also we had things like Rocket League, Fortnite, and Call of Duty getting crossplay, which is something that was,
and that's Microsoft dragging them into the cross-console, cross-platform world. And so some of the things that PlayStation did this year, kind of PlayStation being brought to parity with some of the things that other competitors were doing better than it. And that happens sometimes. When you're the market leader, as Sony is, you can get complacent, and it can be the people in second place or third place who do the more innovative things that then catch people's eyes, and people are like, oh, I really like that. And good on Sony to then react to that and say, okay, we kind of don't have to do this because we're already in front, but we're going to do it because people like it, and it's a way to stay relevant and not lose their lead. They had to dial back on the PlayStation PlayStation Plus free game offerings. Maybe they didn't have to, but they cut the 2 free Vita and 2 free PS3 games a month. So they actually have fewer games a month than Xbox Live Gold does, because they're doing 2 Xbox Ones and 2 Xbox 360s. But they up like the cloud storage from 10 gigabytes to 100 gigabytes. You got to pay for cloud save storage.
You don't on Xbox.
On Nintendo, you don't on Xbox. So these things are closer than they had been. And that's, Sony not making any sort of profound leap forward in what they were offering in terms of their services, I don't think. You could argue that expanding remote play is that step forward. But mostly it's things like finally letting you change your gamer handle, which you could, again, do on other platforms for a while. Nice to not see that holding, dragging PlayStation back anymore. They upped the party size to 16. That's actually more than Xbox has. They had 8, I think. Xbox had 12. Sony's now at 16, which I guess means that what is Xbox is going to go to 20 or 24 next,
32 or something.
Like
It's the next console war thing that people are going to put a number
bigger
to.
party.
Yeah. We also got some love on the PSVR side. We got Blood and Truth, No Man's Sky VR, Falcon Age, which I thought was pretty cool, actually. We got Wolfenstein Cyberpilot, which I didn't get a chance to check out, but I hear was pretty
Yeah, I did some of that game where, all VR games to me have some caveats on them. I don't find that many VR games I want to play long term. Just don't want to have that headset melt in my face for a long period of time. Yeah, don't love that nose sweat.
Real gamer
that cheekbone
stuff.
sweat. It's not the best thing. Plus, I just feel like a clown when I have the whole thing on my face. But enough about me. When you're in Wolfenstein Cyberpilot, you're basically operating different kind of mechs and drones and things like that. And they have a really good hub setup that involves you seated in this chair in the sort of most extravagant, dramatic elevator shaft of all time. So they just do it sort of like a cheap trick with VR, but it's still super cool. Where you look down, and you're like, oh my god, I'm going up this elevator and look at all these things below me in this high tech place that I'm in. But this is another area where, whether it's first-party games, third-party games, VR games, where I would say it was an okay year, but what I see on the horizon actually makes me think it's going to be better next year.
Oh, yeah, big time. I mean, speaking of which, we have the PlayStation 5 coming next holiday, which we already mentioned, and they've already outlined some things in terms of like the CPU and the GPU, but I won't get into that kind of stuff because it's not what we're here for. But they also mentioned some things that I was kind of curious about with the implementation of something like ray tracing, with 3D audio being something that was a thing that I didn't realize we didn't have yet. Like the idea that I think it was Mark Cerny who said it's been a dream to basically show this kind of stuff off and work on it. And I'm curious to see what that's all about. Same thing with the adaptive triggers and all this sort of cool tech speak.
You're Mr. Music Games. I'm sure you've already imagined what is res with 3D audio on the PS5.
Mizuguchi, my guy.
Tetris effect. The
Let's
blocks
do
are gonna
it.
fall all around you.
Oh, give me that with
it
the
is.
adaptive triggers. Yeah, I'm ready for it.
But I got to warn you, Paul. Remember how consoles are on day one. I mean,
Yeah.
do I have to take you back to that Killzone that launched on
Oh, my
PS4?
God.
Resogun was cool, but come on.
Yeah, I had a PS4 at launch, and I was
It's a wasteland. Unless you got Mario 64 on the N64, unless you get Halo
Breath
on the
of the
original
Wild.
Xbox, or Breath of the Wild on Switch, which, and I guess people would say Twilight Princess on GameCube, or Wii rather, but that's unusual.
Yeah.
Usually a new console launches and the games are just not there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
there's
all right.
good news, Paul. PS4 is going to have good games next year.
You're right. Speaking of which, we got Last of Us Part 2. So May is going to be super hot for people. We got Ghost of Tsushima still, when is that coming out? I don't know.
We don't know, but we believe it's still PS4. Our very own Jason Schreier has said that it's still on track for PS4 because some people are thinking, hey, PS5 coming out by holiday of next year.
Yeah.
Surely they're going to start moving some of these games over to the next platform, not have them come to this platform. But instead, he's saying that he's reporting that Ghost of Tsushima from Sucker Punch, the people who made Infamous and Sly Cooper, for those who don't know, I know you know.
Oh, yeah.
That open world samurai game is still coming to PS4. So we go back to talking about how this year was it Sony kind of letting off the gas because they're ready for the new console to they're gonna jump from one car to the other, and be in that Pursuit Force style is a throwback to one of my favorite deep cut PlayStation
Super
Vita
deep
games.
cut. Wow. Okay.
But instead, I actually think they're about to reaccelerate on PS4 because you look at that, like Naughty Dog is like a can't miss studio, and so Last of Us Part 2, just should be phenomenal if there's any track record there. I mean, there's going to be another MLB The Show, and we don't know what else might come. On the VR front, Iron Man VR is an exclusive from Camouflage.
That's right.
Which is a pretty good studio. There's another game that is coming from Eric Chahi, who's the guy who made Another World, which is super classic that people love.
Sure.
And he's got a team making a game for PSVR. So you have on the VR front, the first party front, third party exclusives. I said Shadowbringers was the thing they had this year. Well, take your Shadowbringers and I'll up that to Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Oh my God, how could I forget?
And Neo 2. I don't know if you're a Neo person or a Souls person.
I know you are, though.
Yeah, I really liked
yeah.
it. Both those games, maybe they'll come to Xbox eventually, and I'm not sure about PC announcements regarding them. But I'm not Mr. PlayStation here to hype what's happening in PlayStation. It's really interesting. And I look back at the history of it because I thought, what does Sony usually do at the ends of generations? Is it usually like this? And looking back, I was reminded, actually, Last of Us 1 came out PS3 like just this summer before PS4.
That's why I can't wait to buy Part 2 twice.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll have that remastered, right? And God of War 2, this is the wildest one. I had vaguely remember this, and this came back to me. God of War 2 came out months after. It came out on PS2 months after the PS3 came out.
Wow.
So the PS3 comes out like November or whatever it was, and whatever year that was. And then it's in the early part of the year following. So Sony has no aversion to putting like high-end, high-quality games on the outgoing console. And that's good news for people who have a PS4 and may not be ready to splurge, and not everybody's got hundreds of bucks to spend on something like that, right? And a lot of people live more of a life where it's an opportunity based on saving money and like hard work to be able to have a console and to be able to get to still know that your PS4 is going to be reliable and have good new stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Extend the lifespan of a thing you buy, for sure. So moving on to the Xbox One, which is, of course, Microsoft's console. And the Xbox One, in my opinion, I think has had probably the more interesting story arc or character arc here, where it launched out of the gate really rough. I mean, it's pretty undebatable there, at least my opinion. But, it seems to have been they've been riding the ship in a lot of ways. And one of the ways they've been doing that, of course, the Xbox All Access Pass, which Ethan wrote about also. And again, shameless plug. Check that out on Kotaku.com.
Love that site.
It's a good site, right? But yeah, the All Access Pass, which basically treats the Xbox like a phone, like the same way we look at phones and the way we pay them off over time and include in a bundle. And I thought it was a really interesting concept in terms of like, each manufacturer seems to be in uncharted waters right now. They're still trying to figure out how to do subscription services, how to do game streaming. And in this case, Xbox or the people behind Xbox are really experimenting with different ways to just get Xboxes in people's hands. And what I find most interesting also is the Xbox One S All Digital, which is their, no optical drive inside of it, just a hard drive, which if you think back on 2013, around the launch of that console with the always online fiasco and everything.
Right. The pre-launch, because they ditched that before they launched.
That's true. But this seems like, and Ethan actually says it too in his piece, that it's a really interesting way to introduce that idea, but as an optional
that's the key
side dish here, where it's like, hey, it's kind of what we originally pitched, but it's cheaper, and if you don't want to deal with discs and you don't have to deal with any of that stuff, like, hey, here's an option, which I think is kind of cool. Xbox in this case, also, I mean, it's hard to ignore, like we just said for the PlayStation 1, Xbox Game Pass, which that is like an easy, tie to Xbox Game Pass.
Right.
But so yeah, what did you think of Xbox One, at least in terms of their offerings or how they stand right now?
I think it's been confusing at times because we had, a couple of E3s ago, Microsoft announcing at the start of their press conference the Xbox One S or some other version of the Xbox, and then by the end of it, they were introducing the Xbox One X. And it's like, how many new models are you going to introduce? And it's because we had become habituated to a world of like one console, wait several years before you get maybe even like a reshaped model of it, let alone new power specs and things like that. And you're talking about cell phones and how people buy them and things like that. And it's clear that Microsoft, even more so than Sony, has looked at how people buy their phones, how people buy other devices with frequency. You could also look in some ways to how people bought Game Boys and Nintendo DSs and other things, not so much based on subscriptions, but based on the fact of rapidly iterating hardware. Selling new models that still support older software but have some other features to them. And you see Microsoft experimenting with different versions of this. The fact is, the Xbox One is not nearly as high demand a console for people to want to buy as the PlayStation 4. They just did not get the love or the excitement. And there's reasons that I'm sure that at Xbox they feel are unfair behind that. Sure. But there's also just the lack of a stream of killer exclusive games. When we were talking about the state of the PlayStation 4, we were talking about how they had to come down from a year, the previous year where they had God of War and Spider-Man. Well, Xbox has never even had that luxury of having to come down from that. This generation, they've done a lot that's admirable and commendable in terms of building up better and more, customer-friendly ways to buy their games and things that are, I think, more favorable to people of a wider income spectrum, which is great. They certainly opened the console up to people of different physical ability with the adaptive controller, which is a beautiful thing that they did. But in terms of then, okay, what can you play on it? They've had to go into studio acquisition mode as an acknowledgement that they just haven't had enough killer games. Right. So you look at what they did this year, and like, it's okay, but it's not the level of game production that people want. And so they have all these models set up, all these ways to buy Xboxes that I think are good and will serve them well in the future, but they've got to have the games to deliver it with. And this year was not that much of a standout year for them when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year seems like, to me, them laying down the groundwork for what will eventually become the next generation, I guess, if we want to call it that, because it's getting weird now where it's like there used to be hard sort of stops in terms of like, all right, you can no longer play this thing or it has to be backwards compatible. But now with things like xCloud and Games Pass, for example, now being accessible on your PC and play anywhere, my saves will transfer, which has been really cool. As someone who doesn't actually own an Xbox, I've never really felt compelled to buy an Xbox, but I have been a PC owner for 2 years, been able to access those games on my PC, which has been really cool via Games Pass. They seem to be blurring the lines more than I think most of the other companies, in my opinion, which I think is really cool. I mean, you mentioned the accessibility factor, and they seem to have been really trying to, or they seem to be, they're still in the process of trying to figure things out with like Mixer, and they got Ninja to come over, and the way they're thinking about streaming and like making things more community oriented, and I think it's pretty admirable. I respect it.
There's a lot of like, whether it's the extent to which some of it is marketing and some of which is genuine action, but there's a positive vibe that comes from a lot of the initiatives that you see coming from the Xbox team. Xbox fans, like any bunch of console loyalists, can be rowdy, raucous, and rude at times.
Sure.
But from what you actually see the Xbox team doing, there's a lot of positivity there, which I think is just a real nice thing to see. Gaming can be very negative at times, and it's nice to see them do a lot of things that seem engineered to positively create better sort of community and experiences for more people.
Totally. I mean, and we've already mentioned sort of like, the lack of exclusives, but they have been, like you said, in acquisition mode where they got Double Fine, and, now they're trying to, I guess, prepare for the next generation. Which, speaking of which, it's hard to ignore the other sort of next console elephant in the room, which is Project Scarlet, which is coming next year, holiday 2020 as well. And with that, hopefully Halo Infinite. But even then, like, we still have things coming for Xbox that they might not be the, Last of Us's of the world, or but we have Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which I'm sure is going to be fantastic. Right. We've got Ninja Theory's Bleeding Edge, which I don't know. I still haven't played it yet.
Not as much hype for that, but
I got to jump to the alpha, check it out. What I find most interesting is that their VP of Cloud Gaming is saying that they're designing Scarlet with the cloud in mind, so with Project X Cloud in mind. So that makes me curious. And we just found out today, thanks to Jason Schreier of Kotaku.com, that they're also making a cheaper diskless console.
Right.
I mean, I can only imagine.
Lockhart.
The Lockhart, right, which will presumably be 2 new models that'll come out next year. So it seems like they're really trying to push xCloud, which is now, I believe, in beta with I forget how many games.
And I hope it's still just
64.
the code name, Paul. I hope it's Phil Spencer, head of Xbox. He told me, like, I don't remember how many months ago it was. I said, that's the code name, because it's not grown on me.
Which one?
xCloud.
Oh,
the
xCloud.
name.
Yeah. I don't even like typing it. It feels weird typing.
They want you to do the lowercase x and the big C.
I don't like it. I would say, maybe go back to the drawing board on that one. But the idea is cool, right? In terms of like comparing it to the obvious other streaming elephant in the room, Stadia.
Right.
This one is already in beta with 64 games, and it's essentially a UI that you're already familiar with if you're an Xbox user. So it's just an Xbox.
Right. And games and game saves you already have, right? The Stadia proposition is, here's our great Google technology to allow people to stream and play games on phones, computers, wherever they are. Don't worry about having a console. You'll just play it and it'll work off our servers. But by the way, you have to buy most of these games for $60.
Yeah.
There's like that premium level where you get some free games. But Microsoft, the implication is that your xCloud gaming is going to be able to be sort of crossover with whatever you've already invested in terms of Game Pass or other things. Right. If they bring all the same services there. The thing about xCloud, and really the thing about kind of the state of Xbox where it's at, is that you mentioned them blurring things before, and they're blurring things in a positive way, in such that it is entirely plausible that people next year will be playing Xbox Scarlet games before they buy an Xbox Scarlet, because they could be playing those games through streaming.
It just blew my mind.
But that's how it could be, right?
Yeah.
If xCloud can stream Scarlet games at some point, and maybe it won't support Scarlet games next year. Maybe that's possible, right? But if this is the direction that they go, then it may be that people at some point in the future are playing Scarlet through streaming without ever buying the console, and that the decision to buy a console may be the secondary decision you make after deciding you first want to try a game and play it through streaming, play the demo through streaming or something like that. That's where they can go with this, so that you can be deciding at a much lower cost barrier of entry. I'm interested in this game. Let me try this on this service that I can access without this new box. And then, I can do this. And also remember, games like Halo Infinite, that is supposed to be a big hype launch game for Xbox Scarlet, also announced to be coming to Xbox One, same way that Nintendo has done recent Zeldas across both the outgoing console and the incoming console. So there's a variety of ways where I don't feel like this console transition, if you're an Xbox fan, is going to feel like a hard-line division.
Right.
And that may give people more opportunities, more choice, which is what it seems like Microsoft is doing. Where they fumbled at the beginning of the generation is that they weren't giving choice. They were saying, here's a new paradigm, here's a new thing, no used games. Your game system has to check every 24 hours to make sure you have the rights to play these games, and that's the only way you can do it. Where they are at this point in the generation is saying, here are some options. Maybe you're okay not having a disk drive and you want to save some money. You have that option. Maybe you would like to just subscribe monthly and then get all of our first-party games new when they come out and another library of games, and do it that way. You'll lose the games if you lose a subscription. Fine, you can do it that way. You can experience what Xbox has to offer in so many different ways, and I think that's cool. I actually think that puts Xbox in a really good spot right now. If I already own the box, am I excited about the guaranteed exclusives coming? That's still not as much of a good feeling as what I'd have if I'm a PS4 owner. Right. I don't go into the next year knowing that I'm getting the same mega games guaranteed. I know I have that Halo game to look forward to, but that isn't all the way until the end of the year.
Right.
And some of the other games you mentioned that are forthcoming on Xbox One, they're more unknown quantities. Doesn't mean they can't be excellent, but it's not. They haven't built up the momentum and I think the trust in their fan base to know you're going to get killer exclusive after killer exclusive.
Yeah.
Don't sleep on an Outer Wilds that comes out through Game Pass, which is an amazing game.
Yeah.
That was Xbox only in terms of console for most of this year. But it's more about them trusting their curation and what kind of games they can grab rather than what games we know that they can produce.
Yeah, I think they're in a great position here. I'm just curious as to if they're going to keep calling it Xbox, considering that they're moving away from boxes.
That's why they want to call it xCloud, but I just don't like it.
Yeah, change the cloud thing. So now moving on to the Switch, taking a pulse check for the Switch, which originally launched 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago, March 3rd, 2017. I actually, when I was working at my previous job, I skipped that day to work to go pick up my Switch from Best Buy.
Well done.
But now they know. But Switches, I think, had a really solid 2 years, especially considering that they're the one console manufacturer, not considering the sort of half steps of the X and the Pro, the PS4 Pro, that have launched two consoles in this decade, the Wii U and the Switch, which the Wii U in a lot of ways was like a beta for the Switch.
Yeah, it's like a proto Switch.
Yeah.
Like, yes, you can kind of take it anywhere as long as your definition of anywhere is 5 feet away from your console.
Or the airport. I mean, I'll dig that
famous
photo
up. Let's slap that in there.
Yeah, I'll slap it in there. But so yeah, we've had. Considering the year that the Switch has had, which I think has been strong, especially coming off the 2018 and 2017 that the Switch has had. I'll consider Super Smash Bros. Considering a lot of the DLC came out this year, so we got new characters. We had a game that I wasn't so hot on at the start of the year, Tetris 99, which I kind of warmed up to over time, as they supported it. I mean, Tetris is my jam, but it didn't start off strong.
If there are falling blocks, Paul loves the game.
I'm there. We have Yoshi's Crafted World. We had the Labo VR kit, which was pretty cool. Cadence of Hyrule, Super Mario Maker 2, which is actually getting a new update this week. If you're watching this, came out yesterday. Link. It's pretty awesome. We've had Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, which I thought was great. Astral Chain, which I believe
Mike Fahey loves this game.
Yeah, Mike loved it, right? Yeah.
He said it was great.
I believe Mike. I believe whatever Mike says. We had Daemon X Machina, which was all right, whatever. No. Fire Emblem Three Houses.
Heard it was good. Haven't played it yet. Haven't picked my house. Just been
been
stuck deciding for 6 months or whatever it's been, Paul. Which house do I choose? I can't start.
You've been in the wrong house. You've been in Luigi's Mansion the whole time. So
that's a hotel, actually. That's the
true.
twist.
That's true.
Great game, by the way.
Yeah, that game too. Dragon Quest XI, Link's Awakening, which Dragon Quest XI obviously wasn't an exclusive, but still it had the definitive edition. Yeah. Pokemon, it just came out recently. Ring Fit Adventure, which I love, which I fell off of, but it's good. Great.
Nintendo being weird. I love it.
Weird Nintendo's great. So yeah, we've had and also some Microsoft games here, which is kind of interesting. Cuphead and Ori and the Blind Forest.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's kind of become a neat little device that basically like a little port machine. Like it's almost like a Steam library that you can take with you in your tote bag.
As in a machine that has more games that you've bought for it than you will ever have hours in your life to play.
100%.
That's what you mean when you compare it to Steam, right?
100%.
That's my Switch. I'm like,
oh my God.
Now I'm like, okay, I've got a 100 gigabyte card in there. I was like, I finished Doom 2016. I was asking on Twitter, should I even finish Doom 2016? People are like, no, don't bother. You're halfway through. You've seen enough. But I'm like, no, I sunk cost, but I'm committing to it.
Oh, man.
But my main goal, Paul, was to clear that 20 gigs because I'm like, there's all these other games I bought that I don't even have room to download them on. And I'm like, okay, delete. All of these other games are coming in now. That's the state of my Switch.
Yeah.
Never going to catch up. It's just an endless pile of digital shame.
And I'm always buying things on sale. Like, I'll play Divinity Original Sin 2, and I haven't even touched it yet.
Exactly.
So it's basically my Steam library where I buy things on sale, and it just collects dust. But I know one day I'll get to it. Whenever I travel, I'll get to it.
Sure.
But yeah, we've also had older games on there, which I've loved. I mean, I've raved and ranted about Dragon's Dogma, which, I mean, such a great game.
Love your pawns.
Oh, I love it. Resident Evil series, the Devil May Cry series. We got Sega and Konami adding collections in there. We got all the Final Fantasy most of the Final Fantasies at this point. Sorry to those 11 fans out there. So many games, but then also I feel like some developers are still trying to like figure out what to do with this thing just yet, because like we've also had not so great ports. We've had Overwatch, which I played a little bit of and wasn't that great.
Things.
Wasn't that great. I didn't love it as much. It's kind of neat to play it on handheld, but whatever. Witcher 3, which is, I guess, cool if you want to play that.
Fine on handheld. Put it on my TV.
Yeah. Don't do that.
I'm scared.
Bloodstained.
It's like, remember there was that picture of like a saint, or was it Jesus or whatever, and it got scrubbed away.
Oh,
and then a lady repainted it. when put it in. I mean, that's so mean of me to say,
No,
right? These
yeah.
developers work so hard to get The
That's
Witcher 3 on
true.
Switch, but it just it had that blotchy look.
You gotta play it handheld.
If I could transfer a save from the Switch to they do some cross saves to Xbox One or PC or PS4, that would be great.
yeah. No,
But
yeah.
I was like, do I want to play this amazing game? Which disclosure, I think you and I are both Witcher skeptics.
I think so. Actually,
Yes.
we might have enough power here to actually
Yeah,
take this thing
okay.
down for good.
Forget the state of Switch. What's
Yeah.
with The Witcher 3?
Yeah.
Sorry. No.
No, sorry, Riley.
That's another episode.
Please, Riley.
The thing is, though, here's the state of the Switch. You said, oh, it's getting Final Fantasy and it's getting Resident Evil and it's getting like the ports, right? But what did it not get this year? It did not get the Resident Evil 2 remake, the high-end thing that everybody was loving on all the other machines. Devil May Cry, yeah, it got the old ones. But did it get Devil May Cry 5? No.
No.
And that's just the nature of the limitations of, sort of like where the marketing dollar sign execs, hopes of putting everything on there go, when they run into the limitations of technology or just, what people will actually find appealing visually. You see that sort of like that crossroads or whatever, that impasse being hit because you don't see some of these higher end games coming there. And that's just going to be a thing with the Switch is that, yeah, it's getting more ports than previous Nintendo consoles have got. It's giving lie to the idea that the EAs and the Ubisofts and the Activisions just couldn't put stuff on the weaker Nintendo hardware. Where when you look at what Bethesda has done with continued support, Wolfenstein games, Doom previously, or you look at The Witcher being squeezed onto there, it can be done.
Sure.
Not always great, but it can be done.
Right.
But nevertheless, we are seeing some of the limits of that, and some games just not coming there. I don't think we're going to be playing Watch Dogs 2 next year on the Switch.
And I don't think I would. I don't think I would want to either if I had the option. Like I know a lot of folks out there, maybe this is their only console, but it did get Mortal Kombat 11, but to that in that sense, like again, it was like not my first option for wanting to play that game.
Right.
And we also saw the introduction of the Switch Lite, which was one of two models that we were hoping for a more beefed up Switch Pro, as it's being called.
I think it's still coming.
It might still be coming, yeah. But the Switch Lite I thought was pretty neat. Really cool option for those who don't even want to bother with docking it on their TV, or maybe they won't even have the problem of the Witcher 3 being on their TV. They'll be totally fine with it on their Switch Lite. But Chris Kohler, who also wrote up his State of Switch, which is on the site now too, again, shameless plug, there's over 3,000 games now available for Switch. So the Switch at one point was kind of like a curious thing because we were, a lot of folks were unsure about what would it wind up on there and what would there be enough support? And it turns out there actually is.
Yes.
And it's become a really cool way to experience a lot of indie games too. And some games have actually had some breakout success, like Untitled Goose Game, which is like sort of become the one game that whenever someone tells me, I need a game for Switch, play Untitled Goose Game, play Into the Breach. These games that are like not really that intensive, graphically speaking, that are great experiences on the go and really easy to get and get, really into.
Yeah, I still haven't played Untitled Goose Game, but of course I bought it because that's how it is with the Switch. That's the Switch experience. But another one, Baba Is You.
Right.
This really brilliant puzzle game has the most basic graphics of any game that you're going to have seen come out this year.
Yeah.
And it's, you've seen it, right? You're moving blocks around, some of which are little words. And by creating, putting those blocks in certain rows and wherever, you're creating sentences and really rules for how the whole game operates. So Baba Is You means that the character Baba, which is like a little animal, is what you're controlling. But if you use that animal to push the word rock into place of where Baba is, and it says rock is you instead, now suddenly the next time you move the stick, you don't move the little animal character, you move the rock. It's great. And they do so many mind-bending things with that. And you saw this year the Switch just getting more and more of these indie games that many of which weren't even on other consoles. One of the most exciting, like low-key exciting things for me this year with Switch was the Cadence of Hyrule game that you mentioned before, because it is the rarest example of Nintendo saying, hey, there's a really talented indie studio there, the folks that were making Crypt of the Necrodancer and terrific rhythm-based, sort of turn-based, rhythm-based game, and saying, why don't you do that but with Zelda?
Yeah.
And I would love to see Nintendo open up a lot of their best franchises to the talented developers out there of the world. You see them do that a little bit more with Japanese dev studios that they'll give assignments to and say, hey, make us a Star Fox back in the day. Sega, can you make us an F-Zero? But you haven't really seen them tap like Western indies or really indies in general with, why don't you have some fun with what we're doing? You actually then saw them showcasing some indie developers work on Mario Maker levels. But overall, I haven't really seen that as much. And I would love to see, like, what could the Meat Boy team do if they were given, like, the Mario license or something like that? You know, imagine different, you know, indies that you love. And maybe they wouldn't want to work on somebody else's intellectual property. But, you know, what could a talented indie team do with maybe even a license that Nintendo isn't using anymore? And so I hope the Cadence of Hyrule, when we saw that, was a hint of an approach that Nintendo might experiment with in the future.
Totally. Yeah, and it would be hard to talk about Nintendo's, I guess, current state of affairs without mentioning Nintendo Switch Online, which it is pretty neat, at least in terms of like a way to access these old games that, I mean, I know you don't love to really go back and play old games, but
this is the thing, Paul. This is the thing is that when Nintendo still thinks that the state of Nintendo nostalgia is NES, Super Nintendo.
Right.
And it's like, come on.
That's what I'm hinting at. Yeah.
We are of the generation that N64 was formative. Right? GameCube was formative. And that is the most neglected library of all. Yeah. You see Wii U games being brought, you know, in large numbers over to the Switch. You see the NES and Super NES libraries reintroduced and reintroduced constantly. You see the N64 bubble up here and there. It was on Virtual Console for Wii and I think for Wii U. But you know, when's the last time anybody saw the light? Super Mario Sunshine saw the light of day, right? When that was brought back. Wind Waker got brought back through a Wii U remaster. But there's just been a lack of attention paid to that GameCube generation, and I'm hungry for them to get through the N64 library, acknowledge that GameCube era, which just is not something that they've really done a lot with. I guess we saw Luigi's Mansion 1 remade on the 3DS last year. But I really love to see them move along into looking back at that time.
Totally. And you know, we have a couple things coming around the corner on the Nintendo Switch, like Tokyo Mirage Sessions. We have Brain Age. How could we forget Animal Crossing coming in March?
Right. I think we're guessing on the Brain Age one. We don't know for sure, but it came out in Japan, so we think it's coming to America as well.
Hopefully.
So
I love Brain
Age.
Age.
That's the logic. I don't know if they've announced that one.
They have announced Bayonetta 3, which I haven't heard about in a while.
Yes.
I want to hear more about that. I love
Metroid
Bayonetta.
Prime 4, Bayonetta 3, which will come out first? Will either come out next year? Who knows?
I hope so.
I think it's a safe bet that some combination of a more powerful Switch next year and a good iteration of Animal Crossing, right? That's slated for the spring. Hopefully it'll be good. Or could we be lucky enough to get the Breath of the Wild sequel that was teased at E3 of 2019? Could we actually be seeing that by the end of the year?
Oh my God, I'll cry.
They need a mega game for the end of the year, Paul.
That's
I don't
true.
want to get too far ahead, right?
I mean, yeah, they're going to need to go toe to toe with the Scarlet.
I don't think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be ready. They're not going to be ready with another Super Mario game, Paul. What's it going to be? Come on, Breath of the Wild 2.
Now I'm a little scared. But
I mean, I have no inside information on this, and you know, Nintendo can take its time and make sure the game is great and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe take your time so I have time to go through this giant backlog on my Switch that's just collecting dust.
Right. What's wrong with us fiending for new Switch games? Like,
we were just talking about this. God.
I just started Astral Chain last night. I haven't gotten past the 5-minute anime intro.
I just need to freeze time somehow. I'm gonna work on that now.